Welcome to today's webinar, which will focus on sharing useful tips to researchers improve their academic writing skills. This webinar will have two sessions. We will begin with the topic Challenges in Academic Writing, Role of English Language, followed by a short 10 minutes break. And finally, we will start the second session on the topic Mastering the Art of Creating Successful Grant Proposals. Today we have with us our expert speaker, Dr. Fiona Murphy. Dr. Murphy is an independent publishing consultant with more than 20 years of experience in the scholarly publishing industry. She is currently a board member of the data repository Triad and an editorial board member of the Data Science Journal. Along with holding an associate fellowship at the University of Reading, she is also a member of the peer review board of research data in the earth sciences, Data to Paper, Belmont Forum, and a co-chair of WDS RDA Publishing Data Workflows Working Group and FORCE 11 Scholarly Commons Working Group. Dr. Murphy is a DPhil in English Literature from the University of Oxford and has collaborated with several reputed publishers like Oxford University Press, Bloomsbury Academic, Earth and Environmental Sciences at Wiley in the past. She has also written and presented widely on data publishing, open data, and open science. We welcome and thank you, Dr. Murphy, for joining us today. Before I hand over the mic to Dr. Murphy, I'd like to give you all a brief introduction about Enago. We are the world's leading author services provider, and our author first, quality first approach ensures that our authors receive only the best quality output and excellent user experience at all times. This unrelenting focus on authors' needs means that we never compromise on our quality systems and processes at any cost. All our services are designed keeping in mind the author's needs. Enago Academy is our author training platform that educates authors through several resources, including webinars as well as live workshop sessions. We also have an e-learning platform for researchers called Enago Learn, along with a live one-on-one consultation platform called Enago Consult. Enago offers world-class services to researchers at different stages of their research career, such as two-editor system English language editing service, academic and non-academic translation service, manuscript preparation service, and publication support service. The Enago promise guarantees that a manuscript edited by us will never be rejected based on poor language. On a rare occasion, if rejection occurs, we will take full responsibility for re-editing the paper for resubmission at no additional cost. Enago's comprehensive after-sales services will support you at every step of the way until your manuscript is published. They are designed to take care of every need from the time you receive our main services until you are published. Enago's research communication services are designed to help you effectively present your research data. In case you're interested in any of these services, feel free to email to us at academy@enago.com. Now, without any further delay, I hand over the mic to Dr. Murphy to begin with the first session.
Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome everybody. It's very good to be here with you today, virtually speaking. So the first session for today, we're going to be concentrating on language for writing papers. And as I know you're aware, a lot of that is around mastering the use of the English language. So we will spend most of the time on that. But there also are some tips on how to present your data and also how to manage things like editing and proofreading. And I hope you'll find those skills and practices useful, whatever kind of writing you're doing and whichever language. Next slide. Yeah. Okay, so start off with the importance of good English writing skills. Next slide. So why do researchers need to publish? Okay, fine. So researchers need to publish for a range of reasons. They need to share the work amongst their peers and build their reputation, need to gain their academic careers, fill gaps that exist in knowledge, enable new innovations to take place, enhance the capability of the reputation, if you like, of their institutions, particularly thinking like research assessment exercises. They need to be able to evidence their own growth and if you like, contribute to their subject discipline, and also demonstrate the research return on investment that any investment in them, such as grants, salary, assistance, and so forth, will justify. Next slide, please. So in order to do this, not surprisingly, it's a good idea to have good writing skills, because this will help you in all those endeavours, if you like, at all stages of your career, or all stages of the research and research communication cycle. It will help you with communicating your research effectively. It will provide a good basis and a good framework for being able to manage grants and explain, justify and work with criticism, for instance. It will increase your publication opportunities, and by making your ideas clearer and making it more obvious, we like to people making decisions about your work, how important it is. And it would also, if you like, increase the reach of your work by making it easier to understand, perhaps for people who aren't necessarily in your field, or whose own communication or language skills perhaps aren't as good as yours. So next slide, please. So I'm going to be talking about some tips to enhance the writing skills. So in general, the more time you can devote to this, the better. I think that's just a good tip for life, really. So the more you are used to, say, reading in English, particularly around your subject, the more you will develop, if you like, instinctive skills and a better vocabulary and an understanding of how English works. Get to know yourself. What's your cycle? Are you better in the morning? Are you a night owl? And can you put aside, if you like, some a good chunk of time as well, because writing is usually something you can't just pick up and do for 10 minutes, then put down again. Regularly, right? The more you write, the more you do it, and it becomes a habit. And you'll also, if you like, practice makes perfect. If you can divide up your particular project, perhaps it's a paper or a proposal, if you can divide it into sections and tackle each separately, that's also a way of tackling things well. Telling a story is also a really key way of communicating. If you're actually relating something as though somebody's there, someone who's interested, then that really helps with putting your point across. The more you can edit, the more you can revise, the better, particularly if you can pass between you and another person and they're able to see and give you feedback. It says enjoy the writing journey. I think the thing is, probably the more you do it, then you get, if you like, feedback, you get satisfaction from becoming better at it. So I think that very much is the case. Next slide. So it's got some common grammatical errors. I think this is a lot of the things coming up actually are things that non-native English speakers do wrong, but also native English speakers are not perfect themselves. So if you like, everyone understands that a lot of these things are a challenge, whatever language you're using. So some of the issues of thinking in your native language, obviously. That's not in itself a problem, but it's just difficult, if you like, to swap from one language to another in the process between thinking and writing, particularly if there are differences in the way that terms or numbers are built or expressed. And I think that the act of translation can sometimes mean, for instance, if there are to say specific terms that have a specific meaning in your field, so that can get missed. And that's when things like this, the translation engines can be quite dangerous. So I think it's really critical to treat this as a very specialist exercise. Next slide. So, and grammar itself, as you know, there are a number of different types of words which all behave differently in different languages, and it's trying to, if you like, look at each of these, and it might be, depending on how practiced you already are in writing in English, that you would revise or check them separately. You might go through a paper once and check that you've got the agreements right, and then go through it again and check you've got the punctuation right. You wouldn't necessarily be able to catch everything in a single edit. Next slide. So and we've got here some commonly spotted errors from some recent reports, and again, I think it expresses, if you like, English's own complications, that the subject-verb agreement is difficult to get right, and not everyone does get right all the time. Verb tenses as well. There's a certain amount of regularity, but a lot of the most commonly used verbs are irregular, as I'm sure you know. And again, there are various idiosyncrasies, if you like, peculiarities of English, which the more you practice, the more you pick up, and basically, this is just a list. These are the problems. Let's see what we can do about them. Next slide. So as we saw, the subject-verb agreement is the most problematic. A subject denotes the person or the thing that acts, and then the verb denotes the actions or the occurrences, as in what they do. So in order to make your subjects and your verbs agree, you have to make sure that if the subject is plural, then the verb is plural. So if the verb is a regular verb in the present tense and converted to plural, it actually takes the S at the end off, which I think is quite counterintuitive, but it is a general rule. So you need to have a sense of how much of the thing, what the quantity of the subject is that needs to be identified, and also be aware, yes, that if you get it wrong, it can be confusing. So I think that's just the reason to do all of this checking and try and bring your levels of English writing up is to make life as clear and understandable for your reader, so that when you're communicating, it's your ideas, skills that emerge, and people aren't distracted by any small errors which you can correct. Next slide. Here of articles and subjects and verb agreements. So as you can see, you've got, for instance, missing out of the a in the first sentence. You need to have used as a solvent. And then again, for a word that starts with a vowel sound, it's an, even though an analytical does sound a bit odd, even to my ears, but that's what we would say. And then it's also where you put the articles. You don't necessarily put it right next to the subject itself. If there's an adjective, if there's something else in front of it, then you'll put it in front of the adjective. And again, so looking at some of the singulars and plurals. So in that first sentence and the second group of sentences, it's data that are being interpreted. And again, actually, that's one that native English speakers argue about a lot. Data are is grammatically correct. Data is seen a lot. So, and it's also, making sure you've got an and, a conjunction when you need it, and then also matrices. is one of those very tricky plurals, which again a lot of English speakers don't get right. So if you're able to do that, then that's demonstrating, I think, a really good level of attention to detail, which will be give a really reassuring message to your readers. Next slide. So we've got some more subject-verb agreements here around the indefinite pronouns. So that's things like anyone, everybody, no one. And these are always taken as singular, and so they're always accompanied by singular verbs. So even though everybody sounds like a plural, it actually is, if you like, it relates to a crowd as a thing. So it becomes a singular. So on the other hand, you've got some examples lower down on that page where, if you like, where the voters, because they're acting as individuals, they're if you like, making different decisions, going in different ways, they are in the plural. It's like one crowd, lots of voters. And again, that basically you have to, if you like, be thinking about what it is that you're saying and what's happening, and then that will give you the clue as to how it should be expressed. Next slide. So nouns that devote amounts of time and money are treated as singular. So 12 hours was a long time, $8,000 is too high, whereas fractions can be singular or plural, and that depends on the noun. So, so this is a really good sort of list of tips, if you like. So 50% of the book is, and then about 1/4 of the population has, but then neither and either is considered singular. So it's neither of the cats is black. So again, I think often it's a case of, if you like, trying to say it out loud, or to find examples of something similar in other things that you might have written or read. Next slide. So using the correct verb with the correct tenses. As you see, verb tenses inform the readers when a certain event or action takes place. The past tense is used for reporting findings of the study, whereas the present perfect is used to describe the ongoing research or general opinion. And then the present tense is used to give an overview of the topic and states the main point of the study. So so when I'm writing a paper, as we'll see, you do tend to move through the tenses depending upon how settled something is, when it took place, or if you're speculating about what is going to happen in the future. So hopefully it will generally be it feel logical when you're making those decisions. Next slide. So, as we said, in the manuscript, the introduction usually expresses background information, so that's accepted as fact in a particular subject area, you would hope. So it's written in the present sense. It's setting the scene, if you like, considering contents, and these truths, if you like, exist before and after the paper actually itself is written. The method section then usually discusses a specific process or set of events which took place in the past. So they tend to be written in the simple past, mostly passive, but again that might depend upon the kind of publication you're writing for and the usual practice in your own discipline. So the discussion and the conclusion sections could be in the past or the present, and that will depend, if you like, on where you are in that section, what the content is that you're dealing with. So outcomes and processes and your conclusions, if you like, would likely be summarised in the past tense, whereas the implications and future relevance would be in the present tense. So if you like, that would be very much a case of, if you like, which direction are you facing? Are you looking back at something that's happened, or are you thinking about something that could happen in the future? Next slide. Okay, so the present perfect tense tends to give an action that occurred at a non-specific time in the past, but which also has relevance in the present. So it can information in a paragraph. So for instance, like an example, you'd have numerous researchers have used this method. So present perfect. And then the future tense is used to describe an action that will take place at a particular point in the future. So again, that would be around future actions, further study, and something that's basically beyond the scope of the paper. Next slide. I like the title of this one, so don't underestimate the nouns. Checking the correct use of the pronoun is quite simple. First, read the sentence back to yourself and trust your ear. So an incorrect balance between the antecedent simply won't sound right. So the antecedent is the thing that comes before. So when multiple antecedents are involved, you can check your pronoun use by replacing each one with its original noun. So to check that you're using the correct pronoun. Let's see a bit of this in action. So definite article, the, should be used when you refer to any specific object. And it's used also while referring to proper nouns or any specific context. So you've got something like the United Nations, the test tube, whereas you have the indefinites when it's one of many. So it's a major discovery or an exciting development. So if you like that, that's when you're delving down. It's, as I say, the is the specific one, and is one of could be others. Next slide. So any noun, I say, when used in generic reference, is generally a plural without definite article. So you'd have, bring the test tube from the table. Colonies have been isolated from the plate. The mass nouns that cannot be counted will often have indefinite articles associated with them. So wisdom is not a product of schooling. And the Human Genome Project was an exciting development. So again, it's just one of those rules you just have to ideally remember, and hopefully, again, the more reading and writing you do, these things will be instilled. Next slide. So yes, prepositions, again, bane of many people's lives. And some common errors. So transfer of a specific preposition from your native language into English can cause a lot of problems, I understand. That's substitution. So usage of a preposition when it should not be used, addition. And then an obligatory preposition is omitted, omission. So quite easy to remember. Can we put it in practice? So, for instance, I was walking into the garden, I was walking in the garden. So basically, you can see, for instance, the difference between in and into. If you like, one of them is when you're changing state or position. If you go into the room, you are outside it, and then you're in it. Whereas if you're walking in the garden, you're just within the garden. So hopefully, again, if you really think about what the words themselves are telling you, again, it should start to be easier to make the right decision quickly. So among and between, as you see. So yeah, and again, that's actually a distinction which probably most English people wouldn't notice anyway. So I think it's good to be able to use that correctly. But I think, again, that's not a glaring error. But again, if you have the on and the onto, I think those are words which people will, it will sound wrong if you use the wrong one. And again, there's one which is changing state or changing position, and then there's one that's staying where it is. And you can see, if you like, which one uses the two. So next slide, the prepositions and tenses. So basically, you want to be able, you want to basically use for and of correctly. So you don't, if you like, put a technique allowing the controlled synthesis for nanoscale carbon-shaped rods. It's of nanoscale carbon-shaped rods. But on the other hand, the TOC results are for the cinnamon formation. So again, it's hopefully it's like its usage, its practice that will hopefully give you that clarity. And again, there's a tense issue with the next sentence. So if you like, if you've got a group of sentences in a specific tense, then you'd think about when it is you change tense. And if you haven't got a reason to, then stick with the one that you're in. So, and then go, and that's how you'd if you like, proceed until you've got a different section, or you're looking at in a different direction, sort of time-wise. Next slide. So, the use of the correct adjectives. Again, it's this is something which, you know, if you like, can lead to a lot of confusion if they're not, if adjectives float around the sentence in an unorganized fashion. So this is a really, really key part of writing clear English. So if you like, you have the nouns at the beginning of a sentence and the adjectives go just before them. And if you have more than one adjective, there is a very specific order which you use, which we'll come on to. Otherwise, it will sound wrong, and in worst instances, it will actually mean something else. So compound adjectives can also be formed from two or more words, and you use a hyphen to link them. And there's actually, it's quite a lot of freedom in how you do that. So people, you know, you can even make up words, and often that will be acceptable. So yeah, so it's a specific order is really important. And I really like, this is a really useful table, I think, for anybody who is wanting to make sure they get it right, because basically whatever group of adjectives you wish to use to describe your noun, almost certainly you will not be, you know, looking at a 10-word phrase, but if you've got 3 or 4, then using this table will show you which order to use them in. So for instance, you see where, you know, the these, those, that, mine, yours, that comes at the beginning. You have, if you like, opinion, you have physical, you have age as a shape, color, origin, materials, qualifier, followed by the noun. And I checked this quite a few times, actually, trying to see if I could catch it out, and I haven't been able to yet. So, you know, again, I think that's a really nice piece of information to take away from this. Next slide, sorry. So punctuation. Again, it's important to use punctuation properly, because again, it can distract people from your message if you get it wrong, or in the worst instance, you can actually end up meaning something else from what it was you're trying to express. So for instance, if you're going to use which, it will have a comma before it. And you have to think about where you put your commas so that they separate, for instance, subordinate clauses. And then you also need to be careful where you put your dashes, so that you get your names of things correctly, or perhaps it can be important around the units you're using. And also, as we were mentioning, if you are using 2 words as a compound adjective to describe a noun, then you need to show which words are connected to the adjective, so that you can see which things are describing which other things, or otherwise you say cloud the meaning. Next slide. So some more instances. So the colons and the semicolons tend to be used often very badly by the native English speakers. So again, if you can get this right, you are actually very proficient. So the semicolon, if you like, will put 2 ideas that are around kind of equal importance and measure, which aren't quite separate sentences. Whereas the colon will, if you like, separate an announcement or a major idea, and then there'll be perhaps some examples of it, something subordinate to the setup at the beginning of the sentence. So, and then some common language structure errors. Next slide. And then the next slide. So language or subject matter. So if you like, you've got the language, which we've just been sort of talking about in terms of, sort of clarity, readability, word choices, those sorts of decisions and possible pitfalls. And then you've got the subject matter. So that's going to be more discipline specific. It's going to be more about, if you like, what you are trying to convey. Whether it is around experiments or a description of a population or a historical essay. So you've got to make sure that you're using the right words. Next slide. So for clarity and readability, I mean, again, there's I think different languages will have a different sense of how long sentences need to be. In English, for instance, sentences are shorter than they can be, certainly in German. And generally people find it more readable if the sentence is a bit shorter, or if it's a long sentence, there's quite a bit of punctuation to show which are the main parts of the sentence and which are, if you like, the subclauses. So again, we've got in the first sentence, we've got the subclauses being very carefully marked. The for example, it's got commas around it so that you can see that, for example, and then you're going to have the example. And then similarly, it's if you like, the second sentence is pulling out some unnecessary words. It's putting the sentence into the passive voice, and if you like, just trying to streamline the direction of information. And then the last one is around the wrong tense, where if you like, it's gone from happening in the future to happening in the past, which is what the writer wanted to convey. Next slide. So again, redundancy and repetition and conciseness. If you can put, if you like, what the sentence is about, and the noun near the beginning of the sentence, then that will usually help situate your reader. And again, if you can, if you like, cascade the sequence of events, or the thing, this has happened to it, and this is where, or this is why. And then similarly, if you don't need to use the word gamma ray and you can just say gamma, then certainly in something like an abstract or a paper where you've got a word count, it's great to be able to cut down words and characters. And again, if you can write something succinctly, short, then that's usually going to be clearer than something that's long. And then again, for the final sentence, it's the idea of, what are you talking about? You're talking about AMT data processing, not some steps, if you like. So to put the AMT data processing at the front of what you're saying there. Next slide. So comparison and parallelism. So again, it's around tenses. So if you're writing something that's in the past tense, then you don't suddenly move from into are higher. It should be were higher than those obtained. And again, with sentences, with quite complicated sentences that have a huge number of words that have to have a very precise meaning, you don't want to, if you like, leave your audience wondering what's being concluded, what's being compared with what, how do these sort of things fit. So to be really, really clear. So if you have a comparison of something, it has to be a comparison with something else, and make it really clear what's being compared with what. And then the more you can cut down repetition of words and terms, the clearer the idea becomes. Next slide. So correct word choice. So if you are measuring something, then that's what you should say you're doing. It basically consists and comprises, contains a lot of these ways of using words are going to be, if you like, standard for the kinds of discipline that you're using, that you're working within, and if like people will expect you, they'll be expecting a certain word, if you like, to prop up, and so it's good to be able to not surprise them with that. And again, because you always want to have the main focus and attention on your ideas, not on the words you're using. So it's basically, yeah, so if you're wanting to say counts, not levels. Make sure that if you mean symbiotic, you don't say symbiotic, and particularly if you are in a field such as materials science, you don't want to get caught out saying it wrong or writing it wrong by having the plural in the wrong part. Again, these things, particularly for translating from one language to another, very easy to do. But if you can stop yourself from doing it, then you're a bit ahead of everybody else. Next slide. So thinking about the word usage again when you're writing, when you're recounting, communicating what you do, do remember all the time that it's very much about the story of your research. You're wanting to convey its meaning and to also provide context. If you use words like however, nevertheless, despite, if you're like you're helping the reader get a sense of how they should be absorbing the information, the fact that there are comparisons or contrasts in what you're telling them. So these sorts of clues and positioning words are really useful if you like to help express and connect your ideas. Next slide. So again, so if you show cause using a quite small bunch of words here, so for, because, since, or as, and again, they help provide really strong clues, if you like, as to how you have developed your findings and your insights. Again, by linking the actions you've taken with other knowledge and then with further ideas. So again, those sorts of words are very powerful in enabling you to express what you want to. So, and then with data, again, similarly, likewise, and so forth. You just if you want to make specific comparisons, or in contrast to as well, just to situate, show evidence what that's actually going on with the data and how it relates to itself and to your ideas. Next slide. So and results. You can signal, if you like. Often you will say as a result, which is a fairly obvious result sort of word, but you can have subtler words as well to, if you like, signal, perhaps almost subconsciously to the reader that that you're starting to present your conclusions. Hence or consequently, if you like, allow you to make your argument and to provide again the story and the rationale for why you've concluded as you have. Next slide. So some common writing style errors. Next slide. So as you can see, we'll go through these reasonably quickly. I think that they're hopefully fairly self-explanatory. Again, capitalization can be very different languages. typographical errors are very, very common, I think, particularly in this age where people use a lot of screens, they're typing very fast, or they might have a program which is turning audio to written, and that problems can happen as a result. British versus American. Some people don't mind, other people it drives them up the wall. So let's have a look at some of those. So the British versus American. Some of it will just be around whether you have that comma, if you see, between the second to last value and the and. And again, you could call it the Oxford comma if you wanted to, and possibly get away with it. But yeah, the English, if you like, a British English tends not to have that comma there. What British English does always have is OUR, if you like, whereas American English has a range of different spellings from British English. So if you generally, rule of thumb is most publications will take either, but if you pick one, you should make sure your whole article is in that one. But otherwise, it's certainly something you should just you should check before submitting anything. So then the capitalization, again, that should be something which you pick up through reading and through your knowledge of your subject. Again, you should be able to do searches if you're not sure, or be able to just ask somebody that you work with, because again, often for particular disciplines, there will be specific things that are capitalized for what will be understood reasons. Next slide. So, and some more issues. Ideally, you would always put a space between a number and the unit. In formal language, you don't do contractions, so you do not do contractions as you would in speech. And again, you try. I mean, some of these things are really, really easy to miss. So there's an of missing in the typographical errors at the beginning, and then there's a letter missing from geminate to germinate, and then South India has been mistakenly written as South Indian, and that wouldn't be picked up in a spell check because, of course, Indian is a word, but so it's something that you'd only be able to see if you actually reread. So next slide. So practical tips on language and grammar. Next slide. So we've got the active versus a passive voice. So an author, for instance, might write a sentence in one of two voices, so active or passive. Active is seen as, if you like, more relatable, more personal, or more interesting. However, passive can be seen as more authoritative, if you like, more objective. And you may also choose to switch between one and the other. But again, that there are, if you like, points at which that's more or less acceptable. So the passive voice may well go into the methods section, whereas the active voice might be where you have your conclusions and you speculate, if you like, what might be coming up in the future. Next slide. So a couple of examples. So in general, authors should use the active voice, except in instances where the author is unknown. And then another one where they prefer the active voice. Sorry, that they also prefer the active voice, whereas the passive voice is acceptable for when you're being more expository, more explorative, literature reviews. And if you like, when you're trying to focus on a specific idea, and if you like, remove the sense of the investigator as far as possible. So there you go. So basically, you've got the dog chasing the cat. Where we go. The dogs chase the cat. Next click. You've got a can of beans that sits on the shelf, whereas the women were bored. So subjects and verbs must agree with one another, and a clause or a phrase between the subject and the verb doesn't change the number of the subject. So it's basically, if you've got something between the verb and the noun or the subject, that, if you like, that doesn't have any effect on the overall trajectory or the way that the words agree. And then indefinite pronouns as subjects take verbs accordingly. So each does a good deal of work around the office, but both do a good deal of work around the office. So again, you've got, if you like, it's each person, in a sense, you've got individuals who may act differently, whereas when you've got a both, you know that if you like, they're going to be acting as a group. So remember from earlier, so that would then mean that you'd see it as a plural. So then, and the compound subjects are joined by and always plural. So a pencil and an eraser make writing easier. So it would be a pencil makes, but a pencil and an eraser make. So next click. So with compound subjects, so that if they're joined, then the verb agrees with the subject that's nearer to it. So it would be neither the director nor the actors are following the lines. On the other hand, it's neither the actors nor the director is following the lines. Again, that is always going to sound a little bit wrong, but you know, that is the correct way of doing it. And I think if you follow whatever's nearest to verb, is going to be the thing that it agrees with. So then the next one is inverted subjects must agree with the verb. So waiter, there is a fly in my soup, whereas it would be waiter, there are 4 flies in my soup, which is a really horrible bowl of soup. So then collective nouns, again, maybe singular or plural, depending on either the meaning or the behaviour of the collective nouns. So again, it's the jury has ordered custody, where the collective noun is, if you like, has produced a collective action. But then when the jury members have been arguing, they are seen as individuals. So, and then even though the grapes of wrath, there's plural of grapes, it's seen as a singular entity. It's a single book, even though there are, you know, obviously many hundreds of thousands of copies of it. It's always the grapes of wrath takes a long time to read. So then, restrictive and non-restrictive clauses. Next slide. So restrictive clause or an essential clause, an adjective clause that is essential to the meaning of the sentence because it limits the thing referred to. So an essential clause, as you can see, it's essential to know that it's the students who do their work who will pass. Whereas if you like, if it was the students who turn up early, it wouldn't be quite so. It wouldn't be as important or as an essential. So the car that I want is out of my range. So if it's just any old car, again, it might not be out of the range. It won't be, you know, it isn't essential. So there's non-restrictive clauses or non-essential where it's not necessary, the information, as I say. So the preferred software was not suitable for the payroll project. The point is it's not suitable, and the fact that it was provided by IBM is possibly relevant, but likely not. Might only just be irrelevant for the next decision that you take. And Puerto Rico was a Spanish colony until 1898. And that may well be all you need to know. And the fact that it then was ceded to the US may not be relevant. So again, if you like, that helps you with expressing how your ideas relate to each other and which are the most important parts of your idea. Next slide. So forecasting as a way to tell your reader in advance about the organisation of the passage or the section that will follow. So when forecasting, you announce what will follow, but you may refer to different parts of the paper. So then each of these statements helps to position the reader, lets them know what to expect from the reading and to understand the way that the different sections of the paper then work together. So again, if there's, you could have, think of it, if you like, as a sort of metadata, or the fact that your paper, when it's being read, will be taking place in a passage of time. So you're wanting to give a person a sense of what the journey is that they're going to be taking with you. Next slide. So data presentation. You've got quantitative versus qualitative data. So quantitative, figures, numbers, numeric variables, ranges, whereas qualitative, it's around sort of types. It could be categorical variables, and some things that are seen as more, if you like, subjective description. So you might have data units and a numerical variable, quantitative, 38 hours per week, but the categorical variable, which is qualitative, would be full-time. So again, one of them is measurable, it's in an absolute way, whereas the other one, if you like, has been assessed and categorized. And you see there are the various examples around the number of employees versus the name of the industry that they work in. And that's sort of quantitative versus qualitative. Next slide. So different formats of the data presentation. Largely, yeah, I think the key thing is to make it as clear as possible, and to ideally adapt how you present the data to enable that clarity. So they're textual, there's tabular, and there's graphical are the main ones. Next slide. So the textual is, yeah, exactly, useful for smaller data sets only, ones where you can describe them in a few sentences at most. It's better for the qualitative information than the sort of mathematical or numerical, because you may well be, if you like, expressing relationships through language. And then if you're presenting the quantitative information, it's really important that you stick to sort of headlines and simple numbers, or else people are going to get very confused very quickly. And also, yes, break it up as well, or break it down so that people can see which subset of data are sort of hang together or should be grouped together. Next slide. So effective textual presentation. If you've got a table up there at the top, that's the if you like, the actual values. That's the quantitative ranges and values you're looking at. You've got the CSV, you've got the raw data, if you like, on the left, and then two examples of how you might express the data in language. And basically the second one, as you can see, is shorter than the first one, and it also, if you like, rather than just spout out with like an account of the table, it provides the key point that the writer is trying to get across about how the men were significantly younger than the women, and it basically it builds that proof through the course of the sentence, and so basically the message is there, and it's a lot easier to read. Next slide. So in tabular presentation principles, you want it to be as self-explanatory as possible. You want to, if you like, condense something that's complicated and give it basically a readability, make it as easy as possible to understand. Again, so small to medium data sets are going to be the most amenable to tables. What is useful is you can show complex relationships. Make sure that you're really clear and consistent with things like totals and percentages and sums, so that people can feel they can really trust the information. And basically, yeah, I feel like this is usually really, a good, clear way of providing information about some medium-sized data sets. Next slide. So, and an illustration of a table. And again, I think if you like, this just illustrates what people would expect to see on a table. So if it's there, they probably almost won't notice it. But if it's missing, then they'll feel a bit lost, or like they have to be annoyed because there's some work that you're making them do, which you should have done in presenting your information. So, you know, things like having the number, which then relates back to where in the text, for instance, that this would have been referenced, and make sure you've got, if you like, a legend or a title, and then and also a citation at the end. An explanation of the numbers. You know, for instance, you know, they might sort of think, well, why is it all whole numbers? But you've put figures around it to the nearest whole number. And again, be clear about units and locations and how things were spread out and categorized. And then somebody, you know, feels they can use their table reading skills effectively and get a lot of information from it. Next slide. So some tips for table preparation in sort of general thinking about papers. The table function of Microsoft Word is a better option than trying to use sort of spaces and tabs. You know, just think about what the title is actually conveying. So you should basically absolutely just describe the contents of the study or of the table and give you a sense of what the sample size is. You should be really clear about what the sample size and units are throughout. Primary comparisons should be horizontal. There should be an order. If you have the footnotes, it should be footnotes should be arranged in the order which somebody looking at the table would likely be wanting to refer to them. It might be that something's too complicated to show in one table, so by all means, you know, have a 3A or 3B. Be really clear when there are no values, if you like. If there for some reason there isn't something in a particular field, but that's correct, then that should be shown. It shouldn't just be a space, because that will worry people if who don't know why that's there or not there. And then also you know, provide statistical parameters as required. So you know, if there is a specific method or system that you're using, make sure that you're showing all the values and so forth that you've actually collected, basically. Next slide. So diagrammatic presentation principles. So when you're illustrating data or showing the data, if you like, think about what it is you're wanting to convey in your paper through your research, and highlight, you know, patterns and trends, and show how those are affected by things like time. But also there may well be, you know, relationships or sequences that aren't going to be necessarily that easy for the reader or viewer to know or understand. So show those, explain them, and again, think about what somebody who's coming to this for the first time, what they're going to be wondering, or what will they need to know in the way of any other supporting information, or rather have other information in order to understand what it is that you're conveying and to feel that it's trustworthy. Next slide. So we're going to have a look at a few more of these further. So again, thinking about the quantitative data, what kinds of types of charts you'd use. It would be sort of lines and histograms and frequency curves and scatter diagrams, and very, you know, if you like, data specific, numbers specific, where you can really sort of pinpoint how the numbers or values relate to each other. Whereas for qualitative data, it's more likely going to be sort of pie charts or maps, and pictograms and so forth, which are more, if you like, interpreted. There might be if you like, more freedom or fewer rules in your discipline about how those sorts of data could be presented as well. Whereas I think mostly quantitative, there are usually some really kind of good, well understood rules that you can follow from your discipline. Next slide. So again, kinds of images. You might want to use, clinical images or maps or sort of illustrations. You have, raster or vector. So again, just think about, what kind of work you've been doing, who your audience is, how you want to convey your information, how it's best going to be displayed and communicated. But also, it'll also be a case of what the journal or publication vehicle that you're using, what the rules are or what can be accepted in that case. Next slide. So then preparation tips. So you've got image resolution. Generally, you're looking at a minimum of 300 dots per inch, I think, as a sort of standard resolution. You want to be able to, you're, again, looking at instructions or other parameters or what's expected by your particular discipline. Think about, is it JPEGs, is it TIFFs? What sort of size or shape? Is there a table which you need to put in another plane, or is a figure that again needs to be reimagined in order to be viewable on a single screen? Make sure that it's really clear, that people can understand the labels and the units. So don't take images of tabular data, because it will quite often, for instance, a typesetter would want to actually typeset the numbers themselves and not just reproduce a figure. And then also, what kinds of colour to use? Is it RGB? Is it CMYK? Is there anything that, any instruction or information that you've got that is going to make your passage to publication that much easier? So editing and proofreading. So there is a difference. So editing, hopefully, is what you do while you're still writing. It's very, if you like, in depth. You're thinking about how you're conveying your ideas, and you're basically trying to hone the overall shape and size and message of your article. Whereas proofreading is something you do at the end. It's if you like, it's about format. It's about spotting last minute errors, and it's, it can just be about moving the odd badly expressed thing around, making sure you haven't missed any units. Next slide. So professional editors can be really useful to take on board. I think that particularly if you don't have access to a native English speaker, because they will be able to provide really good feedback on the readability of your article, and if you like, place it in context in your discipline as well. They'll be a very expert reader. They will know what a paper in your discipline looks like, and be able to advise if there's something that's missing or should be changed. And they will also give you feedback that a friend might not as well. They have to be honest. They should be constructive, but they have to be honest. Next slide. So again, they can help you identify errors you might not have necessarily seen, particularly if you haven't had a chance to put something away and come back to it a couple of weeks later. They're honest. They won't hang on to it for months on end because you're a client, and it's in their interest to be timely. And hopefully it will then pay back, because you'll have a quicker time when you actually submit your article. it itself will be go through the review process more quickly, and have, if it's accepted, we'll have fewer errors or corrections at the other end. Next slide. So self-proofreading, reading aloud is a really good catch. Some people read better from screen, some from hard copy. Understand what kind of person you are. Make sure that everything makes sense, that you don't leave things kind of hanging, that the figures match the where in the paper you've put them. Make sure that, yes, you haven't misspelt something that is a homophone. So week versus week is that one. One that I find very difficult personally is allowed versus allowed, or whose and whose. All of these can be confusing. Ideally, you would just put it down for a bit and walk away, leave it for a week, and then come back. And be aware of what kind of errors you make. What are your personal weaknesses, and are you able to concentrate on those?
So welcome back, everybody. We'll start with the second session now. This session will help researchers recognize a good call for applications that matches their profile and requirement, and also guides them to write an excellent proposal. I will now hand over the mic to Dr. Murphy.
Thank you again, Suniti. Right, so should we go on to the next slide? Thank you. So, as Suniti was explaining, so this part of the session goes into the challenges and the different stages as well around research funding, what it is, and how you, if you like, you can match what you're doing to what funders are looking for, and hopefully have a successful outcome. Next slide. So what is research funding? Sounds a simple question, but it is worth delving into it a bit. I mean, it's sometimes publicly funded. In fact, very often it'll be government funded based on government policy and innovation objectives. They're looking for commercial and general, if you like, living standard improvements on cultural and attainments and so forth. It could be privately funded. It might be from a specific person who has a specific interest, such as sort of medical or local, for instance, ideas and passions. It could be private corporations that are looking for new patents or other commercial outcomes, and it could be to do with sort of charitable foundations as well. Most developing countries, the GDP, or gross domestic product, it's of 2 to 3%. So it's actually quite a lot of money, small proportion of the overall production, but it's there, and it can be in any sort of area of endeavour, if you like, of science, technology, social science, or humanities. Next slide. So, good grant writing skills, why are they essential? We've got, if you like, shrinking research budgets. We've got basically intense competition to acquire research funding. I think recent pandemic issues have put the squeeze, if you like, on what kinds of things, what kind of money governments might have that's available for research, but also we make very targeted potentially for what it's going to be looking for from research. If you are a researcher and you obtain grant funding, it's very good for your career, it's good for your profile. It can give you ability to travel more and perhaps build more collaborations. It can even, if you like, give you autonomy or freedom to pursue your own interests and not have to follow other agendas. So good grant writing, I think also it displays the fact that you understand what the decision makers are looking for and what's important to a particular discipline or particular sort of funding area, and it also will enable you to build your profile and perhaps develop research groups or sort of study centres and so forth at your institution. Next slide. So some facts and figures, which are always useful. So in 2016, life sciences gained the largest share, so 57% of funding, followed by engineering. And then there were other fields like computing, mathematics, so a lot of the sort of softer sciences like psychology and social sciences, which then get the next sort of 20%, if you like. But then you've got the humanities, you've got education, you've got business, and they get a small fraction of the total funding, and only 6%. So next slide. Right, that's very small for me now. So this shows, if you like, what the funding levels are from different countries, depending on their populations and the overall expenditure. And you see, for instance, the US is pretty high. China has got a lot bigger, and then you have sort of various outliers, like the Scandinavian countries, score very well. So within a fairly customary base, there are kind of quite a lot of differences between different countries, and that will be depending on what kind of government is in. It might depend whether there's a tradition of setting up foundations by sort of philanthropists or people who've made a lot of money. So again, it varies a lot. Next slide. So looking at Germany, between 2005 and 2017, there was quite a big increase in federal government funding, which has actually extended again more recently, and there was nearly 10% increase in German industries between 2016 and 2017. So, and it's at the upper end of the GDP level we were just talking about. It's just over 3%, and it has some of the most innovative companies in the European Union. So, if you like, there's a real cycle there of research levels then resulting in innovation. So, and it's the biggest economy in the EU, and so this also then translates to the biggest research budget. And it's a world leader in patent applications, and it has a high level of cited articles. Actually, some of which will be in German, I think particularly, say, chemistry. There's a really strong tradition of German language chemistry publishing, but also in many other subjects as well. Next slide. And one after. So research grants. They awarded to fund a research project, which will have a predefined process. So that will be as a result of submitting some sort of proposal against an objective, and then you get the money, to that budget. It can be for an individual or for a team. And usually there'll be a PI, or principal investigator, who is comparatively senior, experienced, if you like, is the kind of the headline or the face of the project. And they may well have co-PIs, co-investigators, as well as more junior parts of the members of the team. The co-investigators might well be in different disciplines or different universities, or even different countries, I think, depending on the kind of project. So the grants themselves can be large and international and collaborative, but they could also be available specifically for early career researchers who are looking for something very kind of local to facilitate their the end of a PhD or the beginning of a postdoc. It could be to do with for them to travel to a particular meeting and present a poster. So one of the key factors, if you like, that does have to happen is there's nearly always a need for there to be a research producing organisation to be the host. So that's usually a university, but it could be perhaps a clinical research centre, or a non-governmental research centre as well. So different foundations or funders have different definitions of who the host can be. Next slide. So grants are, if you like, an award, they're a gift, they're not something that has to, it's not a loan. It doesn't have to be repaid back. It can come through all at once or in instalments, and those instalments might be timed, or they might be after a certain stage has been met. And it's really important to have a good understanding, if you like, of how a particular funder works, what their goals are, and how these sorts of processes work through. So they'll make decisions based on the applicant's ability to supply, if you like, the kind of research that they're seeking. And also they will generally require, if you like, a justification for the specific money that they're awarding. So rather than say, here's £100,000 for your cancer lab, they'll be saying, can you break that down? We want to know, are you going to conferences? Are you buying materials or instruments? Are you funding positions? And basically they'll want to see, if you like, how that money is going to be allocated. Next slide. So the different types of grants. Again, there are a number of different calls or ways of getting into grant funding. There can be calls for proposals in competitive tenders. So basically a number of proposals will be submitted to a particular call, and then they'll be ranked, and a certain number will get through. Or it might be they'll have a certain amount of money, and then they'll keep awarding until they stop. So basically, there won't be a predetermined set of winners. Formula grants are given to predetermined recipients. So as long as you meet the criteria according to whatever the process is, then you'll get the money. And that could be that you're a member of a particular college, and there's a book buying grant for junior researchers, and basically, as long as there's money, you'll just get it, and then you can spend it all for travel or whatever. Continuation funding is for people or programs that are in existence, and where, if you like, there are new stages. There are so once you're in a program, and it might be that you've got this long-term set of objectives, that so long as you keep supplying the reports and the returns and working within that system, then you'll continue to be funded. And then pass-through funding will be given by federal government, or it might be given by the European Union to sort of national funders, for instance. They will come through from the first, basically the national government, say, and then go to the regional organised authority, which will then make up its own rules or decide how to allocate the money. Next slide. Yeah, so research fellowships are quite a common thing to be awarded when you're comparatively junior in your field. There are sort of senior, learned, high-level fellowships as well, but they're quite often, as I say, a junior, sort of, if you like, post-PhD, and they are generally given to an individual. They can be for a specific project, and they can be to like free somebody up to do something, and therefore pay for someone else to take up their salaried position and enable them to then do something independently. It will usually be for a fixed amount of time, say for 1, 2 or 3 years perhaps. They will be they're often for people at specific points in their career, and it might be for somebody who's very early on, or it could be, if you like, somebody who's just about to reach the level where they could be a principal investigator, or it could be somebody who's already eminent in their field to enable them to do something that they've always wanted to do. And it could also be something that's not strictly to do with the research world. There could be perhaps joint industry and university bodies, for instance, or there could be something to do with health systems for national bodies. Next slide. So are the international fellowships, which if you like, follow on from research fellowships, and for instance there may be Commonwealth fellowships, or again European ones, or There's Rhodes Scholars that come from outside the UK, go to Oxford University. So there are all these kind of various flows of sort of international collaboration and a way of building the research community. Specifically, there are also sort of travel and accommodation grants provided by learned societies. Or maybe even publishers, if you like, as a way of encouraging emerging researchers. Some institutional research grants for particular, perhaps innovative projects to see if something can be made into a commercial or IPO entity. And then, if you like, sort of seminar grants, where if there's a specific sort of high-level conversation going on about a really important topic, there could well be people who are, offered grants or other financial compensation to attend in order to be able to convene that kind of perfect meeting. So types of please, next slide. Next slide. Yeah, thanks. So looking out around, basically understanding the landscape of research funders, this is quite an effort, basically. This is really hard work to obtain funding from funders. So you do absolutely want to do your homework and make sure you're not wasting your effort, and that you're basically directing your attention and work towards the best possible recipient. So if you can basically have a general working idea of who the funders are who operate in your area. And that actually could also be the case that some only do medical, whereas some, if you like, are very interested in open research, and there's various things can also change as well. I think the Mellon Foundation, for instance, has just put out an announcement saying it's changing its focus to a far more sort of citizen science interest and away from more sort of scholarly things. So basically, these things change. Research can be funded by government, charities, non-governmental organisations, or industry, learning societies, and it could be, well, say publishers or publishing organisations, library organisations. I mean, there'll be lots of people, if you like, who will themselves perhaps have a bigger grant, and then they'll want to divide it up and then put out sub-projects further. It can be for academic and scientific reasons. It can be for commercial, or it could be, if you like, to just raise general awareness, do kind of community building, improve practices and outcomes in a less scholastic setting. But they will have priorities, and they will have ways of sending out information and collecting information, and these will all be different. Some funders, for instance, don't take any, if you like, out of the blue proposals. They will only work with you if they themselves approach you, which again is an interesting model, and it's one that private foundations will do, but not governments, obviously. So can I have the next slide? Next slide. That's it. So government funding is, if you like, it has to be transparent, because this is people's tax money, and it has to be able to justify decisions. And basically, if people don't like what the government does with the funding, they can vote them out. So if you like, there's a certain quid pro quo, if you like, where they have to run funding calls and funders properly, or risk coming under scrutiny and being criticised. So they will have funding agencies. Again, there'll be sort of national ones usually, or regional ones, which will concentrate on particular areas, or they'll basically be wanting to fulfil governmental policy, perhaps around the environment and green energy maybe, or there could be some health targets, or various if you like, governmental objectives which then the funders are trying to fulfill. So research proposals have an awareness of that. Are going to be more valuable, because they will be able to then feed back to that whole narrative as to how the funders and the government are fulfilling their mandate, if you like, the reason that they have been set up, and the reason that they're using our tax money. So next slide. So charities and non-governmental institutions, they could well be they're, if you like, a less scrutinised part of the funding ecosystem, but they are usually pretty transparent in what their objectives are. They will often get money from sort of lottery funding, say, sometimes from governments themselves, and they'll have an objective. They'll have a community or a corporate mission, which then the funding is packaged to try and fulfill and project or build. For instance, there's the Wellcome Trust, which has a medical interest. And there'll also, there'll also be ones about arts and historical, cultural objectives. So again, there's usually quite a lot of information about what who has been funded to do what in these instances. So if I have the next slide. I think we tend in these sorts of seminars and events, and I think in universities as well, to think less about industry than we should, because industry does is a major contributor to research funding, and both indirectly in terms of tax, and also directly. And I think when there are sort of partnerships between institutions and industry to do research together, that can be very powerful. That, for instance, for large projects like drilling for oil, for instance, quite often they'll want to have an engineering, there'll be an industrial heft and requirement, but there'll also need to be cutting edge science around geochemistry, analysis, and so forth. So university industry partnerships can be really powerful. But they will often be, if you like, applied rather than pure research. They'll often be just a commercial or other direct benefit that is measurable, and it'd be less likely to be wouldn't it be interesting if we knew more about this, if you like. So can I have the next slide? So in Germany, 2017, the gross domestic expenditure on research and development was nearly 100 billion euros. And as I say, the majority of the fund contributors, in fact, were the private sector, with only about 30% going either from the public sector or the higher education sector. So, so basically, the private sector was interested in new methods and products, applications, and I guess the thing is that size of budget, if you think about who gets most research funding, it's the life sciences. A lot of it's going to be like pharmacological, it's going to be clinical trials, things that are expensive and need to be very high standard, rigorously checked, and probably conducted over a number of years. So you can see how that money, that budget builds up. Next. So funding opportunities in Germany, for instance, in terms of research funders, you've got the DFG, the national funder that has grant programs and awards, and it also it pushes money out to regions. There's a very high degree of autonomy amongst the various regions in Germany, which I think is a very important part of how it's regulated. And then there are the more sort of outward-facing collaborative partnerships around things like the DAAD, where German and foreign researchers and doctoral candidates, so that's the young researchers, if you like, or new researchers, are collaborating and cooperating. And that's the same with the Humboldt Foundation, which is seeking to build the research workforce or capability, the talent, if you like. And then in Germany, there's also obviously opportunities to go for Europe level funding as well. And often those sorts of projects are, again, really encouraged to do things in a collaborative and international way. So, there's quite a sort of range of places to look. Next slide, and slide after. So as we were saying earlier, there are various types of calls. You've got open calls where the funder allows the researcher to define the topic. You've got a directed call where the funder defines the topic or the subject area, or the invitation to tender, where they define the outcome of the study. So again, so there can be something like, if you like, we welcome projects which you want to do in the area of the humanities. It's up to £55,000. What have you got? It could be that we're interested in seeking to understand better the interaction between land and sea erosion, and so to tell us about that. Or it could be we want to build this particular kind of software, or we're seeking to isolate a particular compound. How are you going to do it? And how much will it cost? How long will it take? Next slide. So we've got actually an example of a specific trust. So it basically gives you an understanding, if you like, of your thought processes in understanding how they might work. So who do they want? They want somebody with a novel idea and a PhD and a university, and they want your novel idea to be interdisciplinary. So not just, if you like, something that in a well-established discipline, but perhaps something that might combine geography with psychology, for instance, or it could be that there's something to do with computing and the humanities. So something that if you like, would give you a freshness, something novel. So they want to be a foundational funder, so they basically are building the UK university system again. So they're wanting to power up that talent field, and they also want to know they're really keen on understanding your methodology for how you're going to conduct your research. How rigorous is it? Has it been proven before, and so forth. So again, if you get a good idea of what it is that they're looking for, it's going to help you with any proposals you might want to send. Next slide. So yes, plan again, and I think if you can do it this way, then I would say please do. Please do think and think and talk as far ahead as possible, because there will always be glitches in whatever in the process when you are trying to do it. Something will go wrong at the last minute, someone will drop out or whatever, and you want to minimize the impact that's going to have. You also, I think, want to have a long time to build relationships with potential collaborators, and also if you want to collect data, think of what you're going to do with the data, and do you need to then have a discussion with your institution or a repository, and then also I think that if you like, the more careful and considered the conversations you can have with other people, the easier it is going to be to get them to do what you want, and also the easier the next time will be, if you like, because you'll have to probably keep coming back and working with the same people, or having conversations about allied subjects. So if you like, the more ground you can prepare, the basically it's a favour to you. So so the pattern is start a year ahead, and start researching those grants and fellowships, and think about what qualifications you need, or other things you need to enable to comply. And if your host institution is provisionally happy to work with you. So if you can have, say, 6 months ahead, start sort of pulling the people and the paperwork together, and think about the scope and the outcomes and the output up, and perhaps you've got a good idea of what the particular slant of the call is going to be, or the amount of money that potentially you're going to be asking for. You get a sense then of what you'll be able to buy. If you can buy something, you need to buy equipment, or if you don't have enough money, is there a way of borrowing some or leasing it? Sometimes there can be workarounds which, if you've got time, you can put in place. So next slide. So next slide. Thanks. Funder mandates on publishing. So yeah, increasingly the outcomes, the outputs, there will be requirements around that. There may well be open access requirements, and sometimes there'll be funds given for that, and sometimes there won't. At the same time, if you're working with perhaps with industry, private-public partnership, there may well be restrictions on what you can publish, and that could then cause problem at the end of the process if it hasn't been talked through and you don't know who owns what. But if you have these conversations hypothetically at the start of the process, that's much easier, and I think you'll probably usually get a better result. So as it says here, definitely check the funders' publishing policies. It might not be clear to you, in which case it's completely fine to get in touch with them, because they're changing quite rapidly at the moment, and you might well be just noticing something that they haven't noticed about glitches or contradictions. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, thank you. Right, so checklist before preparing the grant proposal. Think about your long-term goals for your institution. Is this something that your institution will be happy for you to spend time on? What are your expectations for outcomes? What are your strengths? And also thinking about sort of disciplinary, organisational. Is there anything kind of, do you have any gaps in your knowledge? I mean, what kind of team are you going to need to bring together? If you're in the geosciences and you're going to be doing an exploration or an expedition, maybe you need some big strong people as well. So if you have build up a comprehensive plan, then you can start, if you like, ticking things off and seeing what's still left. You can also work out to be like what the various funders are looking for, what their cycles are, and if you like, who is fund, who in your field is funded that you, if you like, follow or admire, or basically you would see as being a good example for you. So then you can start targeting funding sources, and think about the grants, think about when and how to apply, and if you like, also get an understanding of who is making up the funder, who runs the programs, who do they look to for advice. Absolutely, I would say don't, if you like, try any undue influence, but if you can get a sense of what people are interested in, how they approach things, then it'll make it easier for you. It'll be a more comfortable process to try and fit with what they're seeking. Next, so seek answers to questions. So again, know your funder, and know your research landscape and your discipline landscape, and so have a think about what is like emerging as a hot topic. What are your strengths? How are decisions being made? Is there something else that's coming to an end that you could collaborate with? What size of team are you going to need? Is there anybody you want to start knocking ideas about with ahead of time? So just there's a really good list of questions, which again to have in mind. I think a good idea when people start going to conferences again would be to have, you know, informal chats with people as you meet them, and just to see if you can then sort of shake down some, you know, try ideas out with people and see what they think. So next slide. Points to remember. Funding. Funding bodies look for good researchers, they look for people who have good ideas, and also potentially people who are communicative, responsive, and have a track record. You could think of them as your investors, which I think is a really good idea, and that's in you, your ideas, your career, and yeah, basically as your partners. You need to learn to pitch, if you like. It's a really good idea to think about how to say something really fast, and also as in a few number of words, and also think out what its importance is or relevance to the funder. Think out what the funder's point of view is, and if you like, work out who in your institution you need to know and what you need to ask and how long their processes take. And think also about confidentiality, on, you know, publication processes and policies and so forth. So next slide. So thank you. So if you're writing the research proposal, I really like this, aims should be larger than the proposal and thematically linked to the objectives. So so basically, if you like, part of what you're doing is saying, this is a piece of work I wish to do, and it sits within this kind of larger aim, if you like, that we have as a group or that our subject area has, and then but this is why we need to do this now and why we need to work with you to do it. So and then similarly, the research question if you like, it states very simply what do you want to investigate, what the practicalities are, what's actually going to be happening. And so so writing your research proposal, so say aims should be larger than objectives, that we've covered that. And then with the research question, again, the clearer you can be, if you like, logical as well, then the better. So show what it is that you're looking to investigate, why it's important, and also what the methodology is going to be. It'd be really a good idea to, if you like, again, think about how that frames within your own discipline and what your funder might be looking for. And yeah. So then writing the research proposal, that you may well have already done previous research that's relevant, or there could be a pilot project or something else that you can reference, which would then build, strengthen your own argument for why this is an important and, if you like, a safe subject in a way, or say a safe topic for the research, for the funder to invest in, if there's already been some progress in the area. So quite like this, there's no checklist for how much preliminary research is adequate. Again, that's going to be something that you'll have to gain a sense of yourself through your own inquiries and conversations and research. And the rule of thumb, though, is that if you like, the more innovative or I like the word precarious, or if out there, I suppose you would say, that your proposal is, then the more kind of backing or justification you're going to need. And it might also be that the more experts you need to try and attract or to back you up in some way, to provide you with some sort of support. So again, if there's a multidisciplinary project, then don't just concentrate on your own area of expertise. It's really important to include everybody who, or all the subjects, all the topics that are going to be included. So next stage is, again, be logical. There are stages, if you like. It can feel overwhelming if you just try and do everything at once. But if there's a sense of process and checking, then it becomes a much easier, more enjoyable as well process. So you start with your idea and the research. methodology, if you like, and what the project might look like. You do a literary survey, what's kind of going on, and then you start thinking about the context, about what the problem is that you're solving, what the research question is, and if you like, then how are you going to try and ask it, what kind of answers are you expecting to get, how can you back that up. And again, so you start more generally and you become more specific. I think, so that basically we're thinking, at the moment, the pre-empirical stage, which again is quite a nice phase for it. So the methodology, I think we touched on that on methods in the previous session, about how that's quite often a comparatively uninnovative part of the process, insofar as methods are often well established. It's just a case of making sure that you apply the right one and to the right level of scale, and also have a good understanding of what that methodology, what it will result in, if you like, what are you likely to then get. And then there should be a methodology and timetables and so forth written separately for each project goal, and potentially responsibility taken for it by the person that's going to be leading it. So if you've got several co-PIs, principal investigators, they should be each taking responsibility for their area of expertise. But at the same time, you need to keep a sense of the project as a whole, if you like, and its coherence, and make sure that the goal continues to make sense with all its constituent parts. And also to basically have the background, the context of what you're trying to achieve, and why that's important to the funder. It always goes back to that. So then, project planning for the proposal. So a good project plan facilitates project monitoring and evaluation, as well as identification of issues. So basically, again, the more rounded and thought through what you're proposing, then the more reliable and trustworthy you're going to look. And if you like, it means any potential red flags or hesitancy which the reviewers might have are likely to be put aside. They're not going to worry about you actually achieving what you say you're going to do. So to be really clear about who is going to do what and when, and where from. So that's a sense of thinking about what various expertise is required and who's going to supply it. Timelines should be realistic, and again, I don't think I've ever been in a project where everything has happened precisely to time. Again, something like the COVID pandemic has thrown a lot of projects, I expect, way off kilter. But I think there should always be a certain amount of slack put into the system, and people are, if you like, people don't mind you looking like, basically saying, we think, we're putting in a month here because, we expect there to be some things, problems that we have to troubleshoot, perhaps with equipment further up the line. So Gantt charts are really helpful. People find them easy to read. I think it's also it's quite a logical process to look through and think, have we forgotten anything? And also, because it's often an automated chart, if things start to move, you can start to see how the interrelations between different parts of the project might compound, might affect each other. So thinking about it as an 18-month cycle, you've got the planning and design, then some preliminary data collection, potentially literature survey, then you've got data analysis, and then you've got dissemination. So that might be, if you like, an 18-month project life cycle. And things might, you might go through some of these loops several times, particularly if you've got sub-projects, or if something sort of is dependent on something else being completed, you might get all the way to the end and then start again within the same project. So budgeting, again, I think looking reliable with money is a really good characteristic to have when I'm asking for money from funders. being, if you like, no stranger to your finance office and research finance officers, to people who will be helping you with disseminating money or accounting for reports when you go back to your funder, if once you've been successful and started the project. You need to make sure that you if you like, know what kind of support you've got available within the institution, and then also think about what are going to be the costs. What are the direct people costs, the direct, if you like, non-people costs such as travel, equipment, and so forth. And then there could well be administrative overheads for your institution. It could be that there's some other shared sort of licensing costs that you're not otherwise expecting to have. So basically, there will always be some sundries, I think, as well. So again, if there is a way of at least feeling you might have some flexibility, that things might change slightly, that's probably quite a good idea as well. So resume or CV, just make sure that yours is up to date, and that it provides evidence of all the skills that you need, not just about your discipline experience or teaching, but also, again, it might be expedition management. Again, if you're in that sort of area. It could be running the budget. It could be dissemination as well. So make sure that if you like, what you've managed to achieve, what previous funders have seen as their return from their investments, and then if you like, put the whole together and write a cover letter. I think that's something that you should spend a lot of time on, and write as clearly as possible to explain, if you like, relate what your proposal's significance is and how it fulfills what the funder is looking for. So then the peer review process within the grant. So the process then from the researcher's point of view is they submit their application to the funding agency. And then it's generally triaged to make sure that all the sections are there, and there aren't any, if you like, major red flags that means that it either should be checked back for clarification or in fact doesn't fulfill the requirements. For instance, somebody's at the wrong point in their career for an early career researcher proposal, for instance. Then it will undergo, as long as it's past those sorts of processes, the peer review process, and that's usually panels of experts who are able to, if you like, rank and discuss and understand what it is that the proposals are required, are trying to do, and also relate them to what the funders wanting to do. So they are often very senior people in certain fields. But sometimes if you like, who's on a particular panel, but you won't necessarily know who looked at your particular proposal. And that's usually hidden information. So there can sometimes be a report or a first response, if you like, a sort of could be some suggestions or clarifications required, which is usually quite a good sign if that happens. Or it could be if it's a particularly complicated or drawn out process. It could even be like a mini grant, if you like. It could be, we want you to explore this idea further. Here's £10,000, have a meeting and come back in 6 months with something more detailed. That's not unknown. But then when they receive the final version of the proposal, they will take a final decision. And then at that point, the applicants will clearly get a notification, as well as feedback usually. So with the peer review, and similarly to when you're writing for publication, the peer reviewers, basically, they're doing their job properly. They are being constructive, but they will also respond to your response. So if there's something that comes back about your proposal and you don't agree with it, if you've got sufficient evidence, then by all means come back and explain what your viewpoint is, But it's really important to be, I say, constructive at all times, and to maintain a very professional way of corresponding, because it can be really bad for someone's career, I think, to not follow those sorts of tenets. And I think even if somebody is very senior and is sending kind of aggressive criticism, then always be professional. If if you feel that somebody has actually been unfair or unethical, then there may well be some sort of program manager or someone else that can be approached. Again, do that very carefully. They've got a note here about faint praise, which again is an interesting sort of term. I think it's I think it's something which there can be a language barrier or a communication barrier. I think particularly if one group or society is a bit more sarcastic or than another, then that can be a bit bewildering. But I think, again, as long as you are polite, if you don't quite understand or know what is you're supposed to do with the response, it is completely fine to ask for clarification as long as it's done politely. So the criteria for acceptance, and these are often detailed and often, if you like, weighted as well in calls. So you'll know, for instance, that the budget is 20% of what's going to be judged, or it might be the methodology is 30% and the experience quota rating, if you like, of the team is another 20%. But these things are, as they often give you a real clue, if you like, as to how detailed you need to be on a particular response or aspect of the project. But in any case, this checklist gives you a really good idea of what you should be checking to make sure that you're clear and that also you have communicated it clearly to the funder, and so that they can easily see. They don't have to dig around in your proposal to find the information they want to find. It should be really apparent what it is that you're telling them. So some secondary criteria for acceptance is, as we mentioned earlier, that if you've already had a good relationship and experience with each other between the applicant and the funder, they may look kindly on further applications. But alternatively, it might also be that they're looking to grow the field of researchers. And it might also be that there's a pattern, that they spend 1 year looking at things that are very applied, and then the next year they'll look at something that's more social. They could, if you like, have sort of themes for particular times. And again, it could be as well that industrial developments or other things going on in the news, or if you can show particular relevance to something that's important either to the funder or to the society, then that could be helpful. So some complaints from funders, which I think it will feel very difficult to receive as feedback, because people generally do work very hard on their proposals. But basically, the more preparatory work you do and the more you communicate with the team and the better you understand the funder, hopefully the less likely you will be to get these sorts of responses. So I could say clarity is really important, having an appropriate scope for the size of the project and in terms of funding and length and so forth. And also, if you like, pegging or benchmarking what you're looking to do in comparison with what else in your field or analogous fields is happening. Being thorough with your methodology and details, and also with your knowledge of the field. So those sorts of things. I think ideally you would check this list as well as the what do you get accepted on list, and think, can any of these criticisms be aimed at what we're producing? and then use that perhaps as a way of improving what you're putting forward. So dealing with rejection, 25 to 30%, good success rate. And some funds and some programs, for instance, in the EU, EC, I think the success rate could be something like 8%, and it can be really difficult to deal with that in a sort of on a psychological, personal basis. So you know, do try and put all these things into context, and basically, if you don't succeed, try again. Basically, the more you try this, and the more times you put in good proposals, then the more likely you and your team are to get better at it, and also to, if you like, chime in with what a particular funder is looking for. Do as with article papers, you know, and reviewer comments, do use what the reviewer says to think about whether or not you can improve what you're looking at, if there are you know, new things coming on board that you need to take into account, and if you like, just because you've been rejected in this, it doesn't mean you're not a great researcher who'll have a really good career. It means that this hasn't happened now, if you like. So some post-award steps. So hoping that you are successful. You may well get all the money, all the funding at once, and then have to account perhaps periodically, or you may receive it in instalments, and that might be over at particular time points, or it could be at particular project achievement points. There will be review reports and general updates and paperwork that the funder will want to see. There could be some continuation funding, or something that's quite common as well is a no-cost extension. If you run out of time for some reason, but you are still within budget and still expecting, you know, if you have a bit more money, I'm sorry, a bit more time, you will be able to actually complete the project. That is often dealt with as a quite low-level problem. So, and there could also be things, particularly, as I say, with charities, where you, or perhaps with society awards, where you might be asked to give a keynote, or provide some sort of representation of either the project or the body that's given you the grant, in order to help them with their objectives.
Once again, thank you, Dr. Murphy, for conducting informative sessions today. Our attendees have indeed gained a lot of critical information.